Today is the feast day when we remember the story of how Jesus is changed, how he is transfigured, how he becomes radiant in glory up high on a mountaintop. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke describe it. 2 Peter refers to it, and some scholars think the Gospel of John alludes to it. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory. The glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. The transfiguration we know in the church is about Jesus climbing up on that mountain with his closest friends, where he has this profound experience. There is a dazzling light, a cloud overshadows them, and there they were terrified by the cloud, by the voice, and by the way that they and Jesus were transformed, changed in form or appearance. Sometimes this change in form or appearance is a positive thing, like when one of my former coworkers lost 200 pounds, or when a little nip and tuck or a visit to a colorist, or maybe the hair club for men makes you, well, somehow appear younger. But sometimes this transformation is bad. Like a fire that burns too deep for skin grafts to transform. Or when those body image surgery and hair appointments result in plastic and clown-like transformations. Transfiguration also occurs when what is held inwardly is shared outwardly, when the private becomes public, one's external appearance changes, and the glow of peace or the darkness of evil or fear become visible. When I was in higher education, I experienced both as a professor and college dean. You see, students experience a lot of transfiguration. The mountains are high for them and the valleys are low as they experience freedom and fear for the first time away from their families of origin. They're exploring their authentic selves. They're recognizing who God made them to be, and this time can be exceptionally transformative, especially when it's held in that tension of parental, peer, and societal norms and expectations. One positive transfiguration was one of my students, a female star soccer player on our nationally ranked D2 team. She and a trusted faculty member had both called me to make an appointment over the summer, kind of an unusual time for us to meet. So I pulled her transcripts and her file, and I reviewed them to prepare for a meeting that I had no idea what it would be about. And as I was initially shocked at this brave young person, externally a beautiful athlete, an accomplished student, shared her transfiguration story. And over the next 2 years, we accompanied and advocated for a remarkable person who transitioned from being a woman to being a man. And if you were to meet him or his family today, you would see a successful, polished individual, and you would be drawn to his radiant presence. But transfigurations can be negative as well. One promising student seemed to have it all together, drove the sports car that peers coveted, dated the girls peers lusted after, and was gregarious and liked by students and faculty alike. Unknown to most was the mental illness causing him to wrestle and to suffer with family expectations and societal stigma. And when on his meds and seeing his therapist, he was a shining star. But when he thought he was in control, he chose self-medication with alcohol and cocaine. One day he walked past my office to see the senior faculty member next door to dispute a project grade with a baseball bat in his hand. while I pulled him aside and we used campus resources to defuse that day. Within a week, he was dead, following a drug-fueled high-speed chase. Transfiguration can result in bright, shining stars or dark, imploding ones. Some of you may have had a little déjà vu this morning. You may have wondered why we read about the Transfiguration today. Didn't we, after all, hear about it earlier in the year? And the Transfiguration Gospel in many traditions is read in the wintertime and the last Sunday of Epiphany. We heard it in February, if you were paying attention. Sometimes I do. And I read the story today with some ambivalence, as most of the rest of the church in the Protestant corners of the world read it only in Epiphany. But the 6th falls on a Sunday, and so we in the Anglican Communion, the Roman Church, and in the Orthodox world, we celebrate this feast again this year, today. But before the 15th century, very few Christian communities kept the feast on August the 6th. And we probably wouldn't even be celebrating this date if it wasn't for a terrible battle. On this day in 1456, news was announced in Rome that John Hunyadi had overcome the Turks near Belgrade in modern Hungary. And bells in many countries in Europe still ring at midday to commemorate the slaughter of 13,000 Muslims. Pope Callistus ordered the whole church to mark the victory with today's Feast of Transfiguration. Happy day. Today is August 6th, and my ambivalence is highlighted because on this very day in 1945, someone climbed not up a holy mountain, but into the cockpit of a bomber. The means of slaughter had changed, but the war machine continues to transfigure our world with maximum psychological effect. You probably know the history of those 3 atomic bombs that we prepared, and how on July 16, 1945, one was tested in New Mexico. And at 8:15 in the morning, 72 years ago today, the second was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, the third on Nagasaki. 150,000 people died on August 6th, and atomic radiation would claim more for years to come. That transfiguration destroyed 75,000 buildings, and the world will never be the same. Because that day we had a new voice booming from the heavens. That day there was a brightness that was as brilliant as burning magnesium. And that day there was a cloud that came and has covered all of us with shadow ever since. And truly, under the shadow of that new cloud, we have reason to be fearful. The shape of that cloud is in your head right now, I would suspect. The shape of that cloud is the new tree of knowledge of good and evil in our world. We, in our dominion making and taking, created that tree. We have eaten of its fruit, and we have been transformed, changed, and will never be the same. We commemorate Transfiguration on Hiroshima Day, fully aware that in our freedom and fear, we have used the entrusted wonder of God's beautiful creation for sin and for slaughter. In our freedom and fear, we daily choose to execute our individual and global ability to do transformative good or transformative evil. It's our choice. On this day, though, we also tell again the story even when the rector doesn't want to because we did it in February. We tell another story of another climb up another hill. We tell another story about another light, another voice, another cloud filled with hope, a time and a place where there Jesus spoke of his departure, which was about to happen in Jerusalem, where there Jesus spoke of his death, his destruction by another tree, the cross of Christ. And today and every Sunday, we gather below that very tree. We gather below it to be transformed, to break bread, to proclaim the victory of Jesus' death over every evil, even total annihilation by human hands. We who gather each week, we come in fear and we come in hunger to be transformed. We gather together and we confess our sins together and we open up our hearts and our hands to hear and to be fed with God's promises. Promises of forgiveness and faith. We gather maybe this morning with our eyes open a little wider, reminded of the symbols of the human heart. The mushroom cloud of power, control, and hate, and the rough wooden cross of service, of love, and of sacrifice. May you depart the sanctuary of this time and place in peace, transformed by the unconditional love of God, to proclaim Jesus the Christ by your lives, by your actions, and by your words. May it be so with you.